Savage was recently talking about Melania Trump on his show Savage Love, and he did go savage against Melania Trump.
Melania Trump has long been a polarizing figure in the public eye. As First Lady, she carried herself with elegance and restraint, but that didn't stop her from becoming a lightning rod for controversy. Whether it was her fashion choices, her Be Best campaign, or simply her connection to Donald Trump, Melania attracted criticism from all corners of Hollywood and beyond. Some celebrities took subtle jabs, while others didn't hold back, voicing strong opinions about her actions, or lack thereof. In a world where fame meets politics, emotions run high, and these 14 celebs made it crystal clear that they were not fans. Let's dive into the most vocal critics who had serious issues with Melania Trump. Some of them might even surprise you. Chelsea Handler, sharp tongue, sharper intent. Chelsea Handler never held back when it came to using her comedy to deliver sharp, often biting critiques, especially during the Trump era. Melania Trump became a frequent target of Handler's humor, not with light teasing, but with cutting one-liners that left an impression. One of the most talked about remarks was Handler's joke that Melania can barely speak English. This line landed in a particularly sensitive cultural moment, sparking debate about whether it was clever satire or an unnecessarily harsh personal attack. At a time when immigration and cultural identity were fiercely debated topics, Handler's joke went beyond Melania herself. To some, it was a pointed critique highlighting perceived issues of authenticity and transparency in the Trump administration. To others, it felt like a mean-spirited jab mocking Melania's background and accent, crossing a line that made many uncomfortable. Handler's style was emblematic of late 2010s political comedy, where the personal and political frequently intertwined. Her remarks were far from isolated. They were part of a sustained stream of satire aimed at the president and his inner circle. While this brand of humor entertained many who opposed Trump, it also intensified cultural divides, contributing to a more charged and polarized public conversation. Chelsea Handler's comedy was never subtle, but it was always impactful, reflecting the tense, often turbulent atmosphere of the time. Rosie O'Donnell, a controversial moment and a public apology. Rosie O'Donnell has long been one of Donald Trump's most vocal celebrity critics, with a history of sharp and unrelenting commentary going back years before his presidency. Yet, in late 2016, Rosie found herself at the center of a different kind of controversy, one that moved beyond politics and into a deeply personal, sensitive space. She shared a video on social media speculating about Barron Trump, the youngest member of the Trump family, possibly having autism. The backlash was immediate and intense. What had started as political criticism quickly morphed into a debate about privacy, decency, and the limits of public discourse. Many saw the post as an unfair and invasive intrusion into the life of a child, and the uproar was swift. Recognizing the harm her comment had caused, Rosie O'Donnell issued a public apology to Melania Trump. This was a rare and important moment of humility amid an era defined by heated rhetoric that often escalated unchecked online. Her apology was more than just damage control. It was a reminder that even the most passionate critics can misstep, especially in the fast-moving, often unforgiving world of social media. Rosie's experience highlighted an essential lesson. The boundary between public critique and personal respect is delicate and must be navigated carefully. In an age where posts can go viral in seconds, it's easy for the line to blur, sometimes with painful consequences. For many, her apology underscored the importance of tempering outrage with empathy, especially when it comes to families and children. Alyssa Milano, symbolism, style, and subtle rebukes. Unlike some celebrity critics who leaned on direct attacks, Alyssa Milano took a more nuanced and culturally thoughtful approach when commenting on Melania Trump. Milano, an actress and activist, often focused less on Melania, the person, and more on what her image and choices symbolized within the broader political climate. A key example was Melania's infamous jacket emblazoned with the words, "I really don't care, do you?" worn during a visit to migrant detention centers. The jacket instantly became a lightning rod, interpreted by many as a callous message in the face of human suffering. Alyssa Milano's commentary wasn't blunt or mocking. Instead, she used such moments to explore the symbolism embedded in Melania's public image. Milano's reflections were less about personal attacks and more about decoding what public figures communicate through aesthetics, their portraits, fashion, and body language. To her, these choices weren't superficial, but carried weighty political and cultural messages. Through this lens, Milano gave voice to a segment of the public grappling with unease about what Melania's style and demeanor might say about the administration's values. This approach, thoughtful, interpretive, and subtle, stood out. It invited a deeper conversation about the power of imagery in politics, pushing beyond ridicule into cultural analysis. Milano showed that critique can be both smart and empathetic, examining how visual signals reflect broader anxieties and political realities. Madonna. Outrage as performance art. Madonna has never been one to shy away from political statements, and during the Trump years, her outrage took on a uniquely theatrical form. While she rarely singled out Melania Trump directly, her fury toward the entire administration was unmistakable and all-encompassing. One of Madonna's most talked-about moments came during the 2017 Women's March. On stage, she candidly confessed to having thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House. The statement shocked many and sparked widespread controversy. Yet it perfectly captured the raw emotional intensity, frustration, and sense of disbelief that fueled much of the resistance movement at the time. For Madonna, politics was as much about feeling and expression as it was about policy. Her protests and performances were charged with drama and spectacle, channeling a kind of rage that resonated deeply with many who felt powerless or outraged by the political climate. Madonna's role in the resistance was less about detailed policy critique and more about embodying the emotional undercurrent of defiance. She used her art as a megaphone for dissent, creating moments that were part protest, part performance. Through her, the cultural opposition to the Trump administration found a powerful and unfiltered voice, one that was raw, unapologetic, and impossible to ignore. Kathy Griffin. The fallout of going too far. Kathy Griffin's clash with the Trumps offers a stark cautionary tale about the fine line political satire walks and what happens when it crosses into controversy. In 2017, Griffin posed for a photograph holding a bloody, severed prop head that bore an eerie resemblance to Donald Trump. The image exploded across social media and the news cycle, sparking outrage from across the political spectrum. Melania Trump herself condemned the image as disturbing, even questioning Griffin's mental health, which escalated the controversy into a national conversation. Griffin quickly apologized, recognizing the photo had gone too far for many people, but the consequences were severe and immediate. She lost gigs, faced threats, and became a lightning rod in debates about the limits of free speech. Her experience highlighted the very real risks satirists and comedians face when pushing the boundaries of political commentary in an era of heightened polarization and rapid media cycles. The viral nature of the image meant context was often lost, and public reactions were swift and unforgiving. Yet Griffin didn't retreat from activism. Instead, she doubled down on her commitment to political critique, turning her personal fallout into fuel for ongoing advocacy. Her story reignited critical questions about the role of satire. How far is too far? What responsibilities do comedians have to their audiences? And how do we balance free expression with respect for boundaries? Kathy Griffin's saga remains a vivid example of the power and pitfalls of using shock as a tool for political commentary, especially in a media environment where a single image can shape public opinion instantly. Busy Phillips. Fashion as protest. One of the most unforgettable and controversial images from Melania Trump's time in the White House was that jacket she wore on a visit to migrant detention centers, emblazoned boldly with the words, "I really don't care, do you?" The phrase quickly became a cultural Rorschach test. Supporters argued that the message was misunderstood or taken out of context, while critics saw it as a chillingly indifferent statement in the face of real human suffering. Into this charged moment stepped Busy Phillips, actress and outspoken social commentator, who decided to respond not just with words but with creativity. Instead of simply criticizing, Phillips crafted her own versions of the jacket, changing the message to "I care." By doing so, she reclaimed the narrative and turned a symbol many saw as cold and callous into one of empathy and protest. What's compelling about Phillips' approach is how it reveals the power of symbols and the role celebrities can play in shaping cultural conversations. Rather than getting lost in heated debates about Melania's intentions, Phillips offered a tangible visual counterpoint that invited people to think about compassion, interpretation, and agency. In an era when messages can be weaponized or misunderstood, her "I care" jackets became a heartfelt reminder that what we wear and how we respond can speak volumes. Patricia Arquette, moral clarity and public condemnation. Patricia Arquette has always been someone who speaks her mind with clarity and conviction, especially when it comes to justice and morality. During Melania Trump's visit to migrant child detention centers, she famously wore a jacket with the bold and controversial phrase, "I really don't care, do you?" emblazoned on the back. For many, that jacket became a symbol of indifference at a time of deep human suffering. Arquette didn't hesitate to call the choice tone-deaf, and she saw it as a powerful emblem of a much deeper moral failure within the Trump administration. Her critique wasn't just about fashion or poor timing. It was a direct challenge to the values that the jacket seemed to represent. To Arquette and many other outspoken voices, symbolism and policy are inseparable. When government actions cause real harm, any gesture that seems dismissive or indifferent isn't merely unfortunate. It's complicit. The jacket was more than just a piece of clothing. It was a public statement in a moment of crisis, and Arquette demanded that it be met with serious scrutiny and accountability. What makes Arquette's stance so compelling is her insistence that public figures, especially those close to power, can't simply separate their image from their underlying values. Melania's jacket wasn't an innocent fashion choice. It was a message, intentional or not, that carried real weight in the public eye. In Arquette's view, silence or indifference in the face of suffering is not an option, and those who represent the administration must reckon with the impact of their actions and symbols. Helen Mirren, feminist ambivalence and complex judgments. Dame Helen Mirren offered a far more nuanced and thoughtful perspective on Melania and Ivanka Trump, standing apart from the chorus of outright ridicule or condemnation. Instead of treating them as caricatures, Mirren brought a mix of admiration, skepticism, and genuine reflection to the conversation. Mirren suggested that Melania might actually be one of the most powerful women in the world, not because she's outspoken or overtly political, but because of the subtle, behind-the-scenes influence she could wield. Power isn't always loud or visible. Sometimes it's quiet, strategic, and unseen. Mirren's view highlights this possibility, acknowledging the complexity of Melania's role as First Lady. At the same time, Mirren didn't shy away from criticism. She expressed doubts about the substance of some of the women orbiting President Trump, implying that style sometimes took precedence over meaningful action. Her reflections captured a broader feminist tension that many grapple with. How do we judge women who operate within male-dominated, often hostile spaces of power? Are we unfairly holding them to impossible standards, demanding agency and leadership in ways that men aren't? Or are we rightly calling for more substance and accountability? Mirren's take reminds us that power, gender, and public image are rarely straightforward, especially for women in the spotlight. Her ambivalence, a mix of respect, curiosity, and critique, feels deeply human. It acknowledges the contradictions inherent in trying to navigate complex roles where expectations are high, but freedom is limited. Meryl Streep, a call for moral leadership. Meryl Streep's approach was quite different from the satirical jabs or symbolic condemnations common among celebrities during the Trump years. Instead, Streep offered a heartfelt, earnest plea for moral courage and leadership, specifically directed at Melania and Ivanka Trump. Streep urged these women, who were uniquely positioned close to power, to speak out on critical issues such as sexual harassment and the broader culture of impunity that many believed permeated political institutions. This wasn't about attacking their character or appearance, it was about urging them to use their platforms responsibly. Her call reflected a persistent theme of the era: Proximity to influence comes with responsibility. Women near the corridors of power have an opportunity, and perhaps an obligation, to advocate for change, particularly on issues that affect women and marginalized groups. Streep framed this as a call not just for political action, but for moral clarity and public conscience. What sets Streep's voice apart is the hopeful tone in the midst of chaos and division. In a time when public discourse often felt toxic or destructive, Streep's message was a reminder that speaking up can be a form of protest in itself. Her remarks suggested that rather than tearing down or mocking, sometimes the most powerful stance is a call to rise above and lead with integrity. Sarah Silverman, deadpan comedy meets cultural critique. Sarah Silverman's take on Melania. Trump combined her signature deadpan humor with sharp cultural insight. Through late-night monologues and stand-up routines, Silverman used irony and absurdity to expose what she saw as the theatricality and occasionally the inauthenticity of Melania's carefully managed public image. Her critiques went beyond mere personal jabs. They functioned as what Silverman herself might call cultural diagnoses. By highlighting the disconnect between Melania's polished persona and the harsh realities of the Trump administration's policies, Silverman invited audiences to think more deeply about authenticity, image, and complicity. What makes Silverman's approach particularly effective is the balance she strikes. Her humor softens the sharpness of her critique, making it more accessible and less alienating, while still delivering a pointed message. In a polarized political environment, Silverman's comedy serves as a kind of pressure valve. It lowers the rhetorical temperature, allowing people to laugh and think at the same time. Through her work, Silverman opens a space for reflection, encouraging audiences to question what lies beneath the surface of public personas. Her humor invites us to consider how people like Melania navigate their roles and how much of what we see is performance versus genuine belief. In doing so, Silverman adds nuance to a conversation often dominated by outrage and simplicity. Meghan McCain, conservative critique from within. Meghan McCain's voice during the Trump years was unique precisely because it came from a place many didn't expect. A conservative commentator willing to speak candidly and critically about figures within her own political orbit. As the daughter of Senator John McCain, Meghan inherited a legacy of principled conservatism rooted in honor and accountability. When she publicly called Melania and Ivanka Trump complicit in moments demanding responsibility, it wasn't empty political grandstanding. It was a genuine plea for integrity from someone who understood the conservative base but refused to look away from uncomfortable truths. What made Meghan's critique stand out was the source. Too often, political discourse divides neatly into left versus right, creating an us versus them mentality. But Meghan disrupted that narrative by showing that questions of ethics, loyalty, and public duty aren't confined to partisan lines. When those closest to power fail to act with conscience during crises, it's not just a liberal talking point. It's a societal concern that crosses ideological boundaries. Her stance resonated with many who felt conflicted, supporters of conservative principles who nonetheless hoped those representing the administration would uphold a higher standard. Meghan McCain's willingness to call out those within her political family illustrated something important: that honesty and critical engagement must transcend party loyalty. In a time of sharp polarization, her voice was a reminder that sometimes the loudest calls for accountability come from within, not from outside opposition. Conan O'Brien, crafting late-night absurdity. If you spent any time tuning into late-night TV during the Trump administration, Conan O'Brien's presence was impossible to miss. Known for his quick wit and a knack for surreal, absurd humor, Conan frequently made Melania Trump a target of his sketches and monologues. But what made his approach stand out wasn't just the jokes themselves. It was how he leaned fully into the bizarre, sometimes awkward qualities of Melania's public persona. Conan's humor wasn't about dissecting policy or debating political philosophy. Instead, it created a shared cultural space where viewers could collectively process the strangeness of the political theater unfolding around them. Through impersonations, visual gags, and exaggerated sketches, he amplified moments of perceived disconnect. The poised but distant smile, the carefully crafted appearances that sometimes felt scripted and out of sync, these bits became something like a cultural pressure valve. They gave people permission to laugh at moments that might otherwise feel uncomfortable or confusing, offering a way to make sense of the surreal spectacle that was the Trump White House. Over time, Conan's portrayals helped crystallize a particular image of Melania: glamorous yet aloof, elegant but enigmatic. A public figure who was both in the spotlight and somehow just out of reach. What Conan's work reminds us is that satire, especially in a chaotic political era, isn't merely about entertainment. It's a coping mechanism, a way for society to transform anxiety and bewilderment into humor. Through his absurdist lens, Conan offered a unique form of relief that helped many navigate one of the most unprecedented and peculiar political chapters in recent history. Jimmy Kimmel, balancing jabs with reflection. Jimmy Kimmel's late-night show provided a slightly different flavor of commentary on Melania Trump. Sharp and pointed, but also aware of the nuances involved in satirizing public figures. Kimmel regularly poked fun at Melania's public appearances, from moments that seemed awkward or overly rehearsed to protocol missteps that caught public attention. Yet, Kimmel's approach was about more than just relentless jokes. His commentary reflected the delicate balance comedians often have to maintain when addressing sensitive subjects. On multiple occasions, some of his jokes sparked backlash, particularly from conservative critics who accused him of crossing the line. These moments led to public conversations about the boundaries of satire, respect, and free speech. What makes Kimmel stand out is his willingness to engage openly with these tensions. When jokes went too far, he sometimes clarified his intent or issued apologies, demonstrating a sensitivity often absent from political satire's usual all-or-nothing approach. His nightly platform gave him tremendous influence in shaping public discourse, a space where humor and serious political commentary intertwined. Kimmel's work shows how late-night hosts don't just aim to entertain, they also help frame how the public perceives political figures. His ability to blend biting critique with occasional moments of reflection created a more nuanced dialogue around Melania's image and the administration's broader narrative. Through his humor, he reminded viewers that comedy can be sharp without losing sight of empathy and respect. Stephen Colbert, the master of Melania. Satire. Stephen Colbert's late-night show became a key venue for unpacking the theatrical spectacle of the Trump White House, and Melania Trump often found herself in the comedic crosshairs. Colbert's impersonations and parody sketches painted her as a figure of contradictions, elegant but silent, visible yet emotionally distant. What made Colbert's satire especially effective was its focus on the performative nature of politics itself. Rather than attacking Melania personally, he used exaggerated impersonations to highlight the dissonance between the carefully curated public image and the chaotic reality behind the scenes. His sketches suggested that much of the administration's public persona was less about substance and more about stagecraft, a polished show that invited skepticism. By turning Melania into a recurring punchline, Colbert helped forge a cultural shorthand. The Trump White House as a spectacle, one where appearances were managed with precision, but authenticity often seemed to slip through the cracks. His satire wasn't cruel, it was skeptical, an invitation for audiences to look beyond surface impressions and question what lay beneath the polished exterior. Colbert's blend of humor and political insight became a defining feature of late-night commentary during that era. Through his work, viewers were encouraged to see politics not just as power and policy, but as performance, where image matters as much as truth, and where the theatrical often obscures the real. Bridging political divides through celebrity voices. Together, these voices show that the conversation about Melania Trump was never just about one person. It was about much bigger questions: power, performance, responsibility, and the complicated roles people play in the public eye. Meghan McCain's calls for accountability from a conservative perspective remind us that critique isn't only an us versus them game. Sometimes the toughest and most meaningful criticism comes from within one's own side, encouraging self-reflection beyond partisan lines. At the same time, late-night comedians like Conan O'Brien, Jimmy Kimmel, and Stephen Colbert used humor as a powerful tool to make sense of the chaos. Their jokes and sketches didn't just poke fun. They created a shared cultural experience, helping people laugh through confusion, frustration, and uncertainty. Through satire, they shaped how many viewed the administration, blending entertainment with sharp political observation. Ultimately, these varied critiques reflect a moment when celebrity voices became an essential part of public discourse. Melania's image, both carefully crafted and publicly dissected, became a mirror reflecting deeper societal debates about authenticity and complicity. In an era marked by division, these voices remind us that cultural critique can unite us through shared laughter and thoughtful reflection.